This behemoth was the first and last AMD graphics card that I ever owned. The AMD R9 295X2 was released more than a decade ago. It contained 2 GPUs on a single PCB, came with an all-in-one water cooling system, and it pulled more than 500 watts. At the time, very few graphics cards had all-in-one water cooling systems. Today, they're everywhere. The typical AIO graphics card has a cold plate with a built-in pump, tubing, and a separate radiator and fan. The GPUs remain relatively small, but you still need a case big enough to handle the tubing and radiator. Sadly, most of these AIO systems will not fit in the ultra-small form factor builds that NFC is known for. I've made custom all-in-one water cooling systems like this in the past, but I've always wanted to make one that was completely contained within the GPU itself. No unsightly tubing, and no separate radiator. A few companies have done it before, like Acer, but the cooling performance was poor and it wasn't sold individually. Earlier this year, MSI showed a concept design that revived the idea, and that re-inspired me to make one myself. The only question is, which GPU? The RTX 4090 has dominated PC gaming since launch 2 years ago. The size and power consumption of more than 450 watts prevents it from being used in most small form factor builds. The Founders Edition is one of the smallest 4090s available. It has an incredibly small PCB, but the cooler is massive. With a moderate undervolt, it loses less than 10% performance while reducing power consumption by more than 30%. Their engineers did a phenomenal job with the cooler, but Nvidia could have reduced the voltage, made the cooler smaller, and it would still outperform every other GPU available. If you're an RTX 4000 or 3000 series owner, then taking the time to undervolt the GPU is absolutely worth it. I believe the RTX 4090 should have been smaller and more power efficient, so I dumped my own time and money into making a truly small form factor 4090. This is the RTX 4090 Erebus, the world's smallest RTX 4090. It's a thick boy at 3 slots wide, but it contains a complete and compact all-in-one water cooling system. Dual pumps, 2 fans, and a radiator are hidden beneath the customizable 3D printed shroud. It's 25% smaller than the stock Founders Edition. The body of the cooler starts with a full coverage nickel-plated copper cold plate. I tediously measured every millimeter of the 4090 PCB with calipers and built a 3D model with the intention of making a cold plate from scratch. I even planned to nickel plate it, but then I found a Bits Power water block on eBay for only $90. So to save time, I sacrificed it for the cold plate and made 6mm thick solid aluminum distribution plates. I love using Cerakote on the custom parts that I make here in the shop. It's relatively easy to apply, offers impressive protection, and comes in a variety of colors. This study on the galvanic corrosion resistance of the Cerakote Elite series emboldened me to use it on the aluminum parts of the 4090 Erebus water block. My hope is that this could be a viable alternative to more expensive nickel plating, allowing the use of both aluminum and copper parts in water cooling loops. Only time will tell, but we love doing experiments like this at NFC, so be sure to check back with us for the results in a future video. Believe it or not, a 120mm radiator can cool an RTX 4090. In fact, the sweet spot for most GPUs is a 240mm radiator. This is the modular Granzon 120mm radiator from Bixby. It has a copper core with removable end caps inside an aluminum frame. This makes it possible to create custom end caps for a tubeless design. As far as I know, only 2 companies offer radiators like this, Bixby and Barrow CH. I found the Bixby radiators were of higher quality, they have more copper water channels running through the core, and both end caps can be removed. I even designed a 240mm version of the Erebus, but the goal here is to keep it as small as possible because this is going into a tiny build. The Skyreach 4 Tiny is a modular, ultra-small form factor PC case that we design and produce at NFC. You can stack 2, 3, or more of these cases together to suit your needs. The front and rear bezels are completely customizable and can be either 3D printed or made with materials like exotic hardwoods. We just launched the latest batch and they're available direct from us on our store page. You can find the link below in the video description. The RTX 4090 Founders Edition uses 2 115mm fans that offer great performance with a pleasant sound profile. Either fan could be used with this design, but I chose the reverse flow fan based on the planned case orientation. I used 2 AlphaCool DCLT2 pumps versus a single DDC pump because they are nearly silent, they're smaller, and they're cheaper. The fill port is conveniently located on the end of the card, and that was intentional based on the planned build that will take advantage of its placement. I used a fan speed controller similar to the ones I've used in the past to control the pump speeds. It has a thermal probe that is set into the radiator end cap to adjust the speeds based on water temperature. All of these components, minus the stock fan, get power from a micro JST connector that plugs into the peripheral connection on the power supply. The shroud was 3D printed on the Bambulab's X1 carbon with their ABS glass fiber filament. This material is my new favorite. It resists warping, it's easy to print, and it has a textured surface finish. Finally, the shroud was painted and aluminum logo plates with engravings were set into the surface. The rear of the GPU has a 2mm thick aluminum backplate that passively cools the rear components and sits flush inside the lip of the shroud. The large cutout is for airflow, and I was able to tuck a small 67mm fan on the backside of the radiator. Fans like this are whiny and loud, so I used a resistor to keep the fan at about 40%, which keeps the noise much more tolerable. I found some micro LEDs on Amazon that I used to illuminate the visible end cap on the radiator and to illuminate the NFC logo on the AIO bracket. The entire cooler is heavier than a stock Founders Edition heatsink, but it's still lighter than some of the other AIB coolers out there. The performance of the cooler is better than I expected. I was nervous that it wouldn't work well and that I wasted so much time and money on the project. The copper radiator paired with the aluminum distribution plates and copper cold plate do a great job of soaking up the heat, and the fans have no problem moving enough air through the radiator. The intent is to use the 4090 Erebus in a 6-liter build with optimized voltages and clock speeds, something that I would do regardless of the build. I'll be using the Nano HDPlex 500W GAN, so I definitely want to avoid overburdening the power supply. I used MSI Afterburner to lock the core at a stable 2600 MHz at 0.9 mV and overclock the RAM by 1000 MHz. This isn't overclocked from stock settings, but the undervolt dropped the power draw by more than 120 watts. I created a custom fan curve to set the fan stop at 35 degrees Celsius or less with a maximum of 100% fan speed at 80 degrees Celsius. The controller for the pumps was set at similar values. The pumps are nearly silent. At full speed, it's difficult to tell if they're even running, especially with the shroud on. I tested the GPU on an open-air bench with a variety of games. I never experienced thermal throttling, nor does a fan ever need to run at 100%. The memory temperature is consistently lower than the Founders Edition, even with the overclock. Water cooling isn't always better, but it does make it possible to use higher performance components in ultra-small form factor builds. An air-cooled solution might be possible, but it would require making larger custom heat sinks. I have a few ideas for improving the design to make it even better. If I used a 240mm radiator, then the thermals would rival the best all-in-one and even custom water cooling setups available. I hope to see AIO GPUs like this in the future. And before you say that they never would make a card like this because it's just too expensive, take a look at the Asus RTX 4090 Matrix with a price tag of $3,200. This mod, including the prototype parts, cost me less than $800 in materials. And I did this in my garage. I'm sure it could be made at volume for even less. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for the upcoming build video that will feature the RTX 4090 Erebus. Until then, here's a sneak peek.